I'd like to call the Town of Litchfield Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting to order at, I believe it's 7:02. Start with roll call. So with you, John.
John Brunel, member.
John Devereaux, member.
Laura Gandia, member.
Doug Gilbo, member.
Jerry Sorensen, member.
Jeff Blackwell, building inspector.
Right, we do have the meeting minutes from the June meeting to approve. I was not here for that. So if somebody, has everybody had a chance to look at those June meeting minutes? Somebody wants to make a motion
I
for
make a
that?
motion to accept as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And I'm abstaining because I was not present for that. All right, so we have some cases that have been continued for quite some time, all with the Row Properties LLC. I need to recuse myself from that, so John, you'll be taking over.
Sure. So we'll start with case 2/21-2022-1, which is a variance for LZO Article 800, Section 803, to allow a gas station with one access egress point where two are required. This is a case that was continued from our June meeting. The applicant is Thoreau Properties LLC. The owner is Thoreau Property LLC. Location is 522 Charles Bancroft Highway, Litchfield, New Hampshire, map 22, lot 11. So we've been here before, so good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. First, thank you all for coming out. And though it's not great weather outside, so I guess we're glad we're in. My name is Morgan Hollis. I'm an attorney at Gottesman & Hollis, 39 East Pearl Street, Nashua, New Hampshire. And I'm here this evening representing Thoreau Properties LLC, which is the applicant, and Thoreau Development LLC, which is the owner. With me this evening is Renee Thoreau, who's representing both the owner and the applicant. I also have Jim Petropoulos of Hayner Swanson, who's at the table with me. He's the project engineer, and Mark Jacobs is here in the audience. He's the project wetland scientist. This property is located on map 22, lot 11. And Mr. Chair, if I might, I have a book of exhibits that I'll be referring to. If I can pass those out to you, if you want to take those two. I'll take these guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Attorney Hollis, just one question. I know that today was wanting 5 members. We only have 4 tonight, so we're okay with that to move forward to 4?
Yes, we're going to go. Thank you. Thanks for asking.
I didn't want to get going if we're going to have to
I
stall
also,
again.
I also have a copy of the town, portion of the town tax map just locating the property.
Oh, thank you.
So everybody, they're all familiar with it, but as we go through this process, thinking about it, it's always good to have. So this property is identified as map 22, lot 11. And I've highlighted on that handout, single handout sheet that I gave you. It's on Charles Bancroft Highway. The lot itself, there's some history to this. For those of you who've been on the board a long time, a brief history is in 2012, there was an application for some uses brought before this board, and they were denied. In 2019, I was representing the applicant and brought a new set of applications for a totally different project, the project being a convenience store gas station along with a storage facility located to the rear. The board considered the question of whether this was a different application than the 2012 application and voted that it was. And certain variances and special exception were applied for and received from this board back in 2019. That plan, which was presented to the zoning board, had 2 driveways. And my client, both as owner and applicant, then proceeded to move forward to get ready for a site plan application. And the first step is to determine what the Department of Transportation might require for roadway improvements. And we ran into a bit of a surprise when the New Hampshire DOT ruled that this property is limited to 1 driveway cut. whereas the plan we presented had 2 driveway cuts. We spent a great deal of time back and forth with our consultant, DOT, and the 2 neighbors. The history behind one cut is that our neighbor immediately to the south, which is located, there's a sort of 2 users on one lot, which has now been subdivided, but there was a auto repair shop, and there was also a residence. That lot and this lot were a single lot, and they got subdivided. And there are some laws and regulations with DOT, which goes back to a certain date and time, and then determines how many curb cuts you get. And you get a total that limits this property to only 1 curb cut. We tried to work with the abutters on both sides, the north, which is the Conservation Commission, and the south, which is the auto repair shop and residence, to see if we couldn't end up with sharing a curb cut either way. And to the south, they needed 2 separate curb cuts because they have 2 separate uses. And to the north, it just really wasn't going to work out. Conservation Commission wasn't too excited about it, and I didn't blame them. So as a result, we had to take a fresh look at the project. By this time, several of the variances had expired. The ordinance has changed. And as a result of having 1 driveway instead of 2, we also had to apply for 2 new ordinances, 2 new variances. So we are here this evening before you on an application for 2 expired variances, one for 455 feet of frontage where 500 is required for a gas station in the northern commercial, and a storage facility which is not permitted in the northern commercial. Those 2 were granted previously. The only thing that there have been some minor changes in the impact on the wetlands, and you'll hear about that. We're here for a special exception for filling in the wetlands. Our application is actually a little less impactful. And we're here for 2 new variances, one for 2 driveways required under Section 803 for gas station, and one for 2 driveways required for fast food. So that's sort of an introduction to the history, and I will take the variances in order and make my points, some of which are duplicative, Mr. Chair. And when I finish the first one, my suggestion would be I'd be happy to roll into the rest, so you don't have to deliberate on the first one, and you'll hear the similar arguments, but I'll let you decide it at the end of the first variance.
Okay.
If I might, I'd ask Mr. Petropoulos to introduce the site on the site plan, which he has in front of you, which is also Exhibit 1 in your book. So if you can't see the board, you can see your plan.
Thank you, Morgan. For the record, my name is Jim Petropoulos. I'm a civil engineer with Hayner Swanson, Inc., doing business at 3 Congress Street in Nashua, New Hampshire. And as Morgan read into the record, we have been to numerous boards, conservation commissions, planning boards. We've been to this board on several occasions. I'd like to just start out by pointing out what's a little different than the last time we were here before the zoning board. As Morgan mentioned, the first thing you'll notice is a singular curb cut here versus a previous plan that had 2 curb cuts. The storage units in the back are essentially the same, and they're in the same configuration, 9 buildings back there, varying size self-storage units that will be completely fenced in. Changes to the front area include a smaller building. The previous building was about 8,800 square feet. This building, gas and convenience store, measures about 5,500 square feet. Other changes are the commercial fueling dispensers will be located on the side of the property instead of the rear of the property. And really that change was necessitated, pardon me, by the curb cut requirement by the state. We continue to have dispensers in the front with our canopy, access around the building. There's the ability for a drive-through and a pickup window in the back of the building here with ample stacking on the west and the north side of the facility. I won't bore you with the engineering details. Obviously, if the project's fortunate enough to move forward, things like stormwater lighting and landscaping are all items that we will go into great detail with the planning board. At some point, Morgan will probably turn back to me when we talk about special exception. We have buffer impacts with the project. We have no wetland impacts. But I'll go into some detail. I'll have a different drawing to present to you at that point for access and for stormwater in the back here, which was previously permitted, right, Morgan? Yep. And then access through a wetland area here. So I'll come back to that, Morgan.
And just so you're not confused, you see on Exhibit 1, there are some yellow highlighted areas. That's what we'll be talking about at the special exception.
Okay.
So the first variance application, thank you, Jim. The first variance application is variance requested from Article 800, Section 803A3 to permit a gas station with one access egress point where two are required. And you have, I think you all have the application in front of you. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time reiterating it, but I think it's important to at least highlight it because it has been some time probably since you looked at it when it first came in. The points of law, of course, are the first one is won't be contrary to the public interest. And so the standards of the points of law of not being contrary to the public interest are that you won't, by granting the variance, you won't materially alter the character of the neighborhood. So that's the first criteria. What is the character of the neighborhood? The character of the neighborhood is defined by the zoning district. And in this case, the use, which is a gas station, for which we're asking for relief from the two access points down to one access point, is in fact a permitted use by conditional use permit to be reviewed by the planning board. So we're not creating a use that is not under consideration for the neighborhood. It'll be up to the planning board to determine whether we meet all the conditions of approval. But the first threshold is if you granted a variance, are you stuffing in something that doesn't fit in the neighborhood? For example, are you putting a gas station next to residences? In this instance, as I say, if you grant the variance, you would be allowing a use that still has to go to the planning board. The only difference is instead of two driveways, we're only going to have one driveway. Having one versus two won't materially alter the character of the neighborhood. There are other commercial uses in there, some of which have two, but most of which have a single driveway access. As I alluded to, the DOT, when we went to the DOT to get our the Department of Transportation to get our driveway permit, reviewing the process, the first thing they said was, let's look back to 1971. What were the number of driveways in 1971? And what I've given you is Exhibit 2. If you turn to Exhibit 2, is it talks about ruling on driveway permits and what the requirement is. And specifically, I've highlighted the section 3 pages in, which is really the only material part of the whole Exhibit 2. But it says is provide a uniform procedure for the receipt of applications, review of submissions, etc. And effective compliance effective July 1, 1971. So that's really the date that they look back to is 1971. And then they make a determination, and this is on pages 6 of 31. Lot of record means a parcel of land that was separately described and delineated by the deed back in 1971. So they took our lot and looked at it. In 1971, as I stated, they had in fact a single parcel. And at that point, they determined, if you turn to page 16, driveway limitations, again highlighted, no more than one driveway shall be permitted to a single parcel of land or lot of record unless there is a safe distance of 120 meters or 400 feet. And if you turn to the next page, and it can't be an unreasonable hazard. When frontage is 500 feet or less, no more than two driveways to a single parcel. They looked at it, they determined we're going to get one driveway. That's all we get. And so we're kind of in a unique situation where we have a lot of frontage, a very large lot, but one driveway. We have a use that's permitted, but we don't have the ability to obtain two driveways. So we need relief from your ordinance. In this case, we looked into the general purpose of the ordinance. As you know, the general purpose is safety. Why is there a zoning ordinance? It's to preserve values and protect safety. And one of the criteria, the first criteria, is health, safety, and welfare. Will there be a threat to health, safety, or welfare? Well, one of the board members had asked at a prior meeting, what was the genesis of this ordinance? And try as we might, between Jeff and our office, we researched, we inquired of former inspectors, former selectmen. Nobody can really find why this ordinance was put in. So then we moved to the fire department, and my client met with the fire department, the fire chief, and Mr. Blackwell met with the fire chief. And the fire chief wrote a letter, I believe, that's in your packet, and in essence told us we don't have an issue from a fire safety perspective of one driveway as proposed to be located on this plan. So we're not sure why there were two. Can make assumptions, you know, you want to get in. If one's blocked, you want to get in. Maybe a gas station would have a greater risk of blockage. I'm not sure. But in any event, from the fire chief's perspective, there's no threat to health, safety, or welfare. I also included under Exhibit 3, if you turn to tab 3, I asked the traffic consulting engineer on this, GPI, to talk about, in a letter addressed to my client, their thoughts about the driveway location. And I've highlighted the relevant sections, which I think are important in determining whether there's any threat to health, safety, or welfare. Based upon the proposed site driveway location, adequate site distance that meets all applicable state and national standards can be achieved. Providing two driveways for a similar use is common, if not preferred. However, the provision of two driveways is not a prerequisite for operational safety. Two driveways provide some degree of flexibility in design and convenience for motors for access and egress. That is common right-in, right-out traffic maneuver. However, as proposed, the internal site circulation for all amenities within the site can be adequately accommodated from a traffic operations perspective. The only primary difference with the subject site is that access to and from the public highway will be concentrated on a single location. Then they reference a similar site with a convenience store, fueling stations located in Merrimack is accessed via one driveway. Preliminary analysis has indicated that the ideal geometric configuration for the Charles Bancroft Highway intersection with a proposed site driveway includes an exclusive northbound left turn lane and exclusive southbound right turn lane. So this is referenced because that's what the state has recommended as to improvements. Obviously, we would have to go to the planning board, go back to the DOT, but this is just an indication to you that the applicant is willing to make whatever necessary improvements in Charles Bancroft Highway, which might be required for left turning movements on northbound traffic and right turning movements on southbound traffic. And then it goes on to say, accepting that, our preliminary analysis demonstrates all safety requirements in terms of site distance are satisfied. Further, appropriate geometric improvements to both Charles Bancroft Highway and the site driveway are expected to mitigate anticipated increases, safely accommodate site-related traffic. If you turn to tab 4, I independently did some investigation to see if there were any standards out there. When we were looking at the town, why would they have voted two driveway requirements? I tried to find other towns that had two driveway requirements, and I did not find any. But what I did find is a number of municipalities that have driveway guidelines for gas stations and convenience stores. So I attached one and highlighted what are the purpose of these guidelines, just to give you the sense of this is why you would have driveways for gas stations regulated. And they talk about key objectives on first page: protect and enhance the character and quality of commercial districts and adjacent neighborhoods, minimize negative impacts to adjacent uses resulting from on-site activities. The next page is they actually give a recommendation: seek shared access with adjoining commercial uses where feasible to minimize curb cuts and enhance pedestrian and vehicle circulation. And on the third page is another town, which is a much smaller town, and I don't see the name of it there, but it talks about driveway openings, and they talk about traffic congestion. as I've highlighted, with multiple proposed driveway openings where you have some coming in and going out on the south end and some coming in going out the north end. And my research indicates that actually 2 driveways might be a little bit more of a safety concern than a single. But I give that just to add to the credence of the fire chief who feels comfortable in the application. Number 2 is the proposed use must be in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. And of course, as I said, it's to protect property values. It's basically the same standard as number 1. You all know that from the court cases that have come down. It's not materially altering the character of the neighborhood because it's permitted by CUP. And as reflected, there's no threat to health, safety, or welfare of the public if you were to grant this variance to allow a single driveway as presented, subject to DOT approval, planning board approval. So I think those 2 conditions are important, and you might add those as a condition if you see fit to approve, subject to DOT approval and, of course, planning board approval of the location of the driveway. Number 3 is substantial justice will be done. This is the Northern Commercial District. The use is determined by conditional use permit, and we think that substantial justice is done to allow us to have a single driveway where there really doesn't appear to be a significant apparent reason for requiring 2 versus 1, and where we have some expert opinions that say the design as presented will be safe, and where you have the fire chief okaying it. So we think substantial justice will be done in that there will be no harm to the public, but if you denied it, there would be a lot of harm to the applicant. As you know, you have to balance those 2. Number 4 is no adverse impact on values of 1 versus 2 driveways. As Jim stated, we've been to the Conservation Commission, our immediate neighborhood. We went to the neighbor to the south. Both of those people were aware that we would prefer 2 driveways. However, we were unable to either share their driveway in any respect or acquire their driveway rights in any respect. So they were aware of the proposal at no time, unless we hear some tonight, which I'm not aware of. Has anybody objected to us about 1 driveway versus 2? Our engineer, as you said, actually thinks the single driveway provides better spacing for both the northern conservation driveway, which, as you know, is quite close to our site, and the southern, which is around the bend. And if our driveway had to be close to that brook, it's pretty close to their driveway too. So we don't think it'll adversely impact their value. Again, we're not proposing any difference in use because of the driveway situation. And then finally, we have the hardship argument. And the hardship, we have to point out the unique conditions of the site, and we then have to present that there's no fair and substantial relationship behind the purpose of the ordinance and enforcement as to this lot. So what's unique about this lot? I think the most unique is we have this very large lot with almost 500 feet of frontage, and we're allowed 1 driveway cut, and that's all we can do. So whatever use we want to put on that may be permitted, we're down to 1 driveway, but your ordinance requires 2. It's kind of a unique situation in our book. It's also the third largest lot along that entire strip of Charles Bancroft Highway, 3rd largest in terms of frontage. So we're imposing this requirement of the single driveway for convenience for a gas station is a hardship on the owner. There doesn't seem to be any fair and substantial relationship between the requirement of 2 driveways as applied to this site. As I pointed out, we can't even find what the purpose was of this particular ordinance, other than safety, and I think we've addressed that. Is our proposed use reasonable? The use is reasonable, and we think the use with a single driveway is reasonable, given all of what we've presented this evening. So, Mr. Chair, we think we've met all 5 criteria for that first variance. And with your permission, I would sort of go on to the others unless you want to have discussion on the first variance and vote on that.
Members, are you concerned with, can we go with the 1, go through the rest, and then kind of take them one at a time?
Go with the rest.
Jerry?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, and then we're gonna do like a summary.
Yeah, we'll go through each one
All right.
point by point, and we'll ask questions
And
directly.
you can ask questions about them anytime.
Yeah, get all the information, because I think a lot of it when I read it, kind of relates back. and
It's all
so
do.
If we got it all, then we'll be able to do that, yes.
Great, thank you. So the second variance application is from Article 800, 803C1, which is to permit a fast food restaurant with takeout and/or drive-through service with one access egress point where two are required. Again, there have been some changes in your ordinance, and the use itself for a convenience or a fast food restaurant with takeout and/or drive-through service, which is what we're proposing, is a permitted use in this district. However, it requires two access egress points, and we are unable to do that for all the reasons I've already described. So we're requesting relief from that ordinance. Again, you have the application, you've had a chance to review it, so you know my arguments. You've also heard my arguments, which are very similar, so I'm going to be very quick about them. Number one, not contrary to public interest. It's the same as I just made. The use is allowed by conditional use permit. That means if certain criteria are found, it's granted. So if you granted one driveway for a drive-through for this use, it's not going to be that much different than other uses in the district, commercial uses. The driveway itself does not define the use. And it will not threaten public health, safety, or welfare. Again, I've talked about health, safety, and welfare issues of one driveway versus two. Well, that was as to a gas station. I make the same arguments as to the drive-through for a fast food restaurant. Number two, in keeping with the spirit of the ordinance, again, main purpose and spirit of any zoning ordinance is to maintain values, keep out competing uses, protect health, safety, and welfare. One driveway versus two doesn't impact the use itself. And so you look at health, safety, and welfare, and I've already addressed that. Number three, substantial justice will be done. If you grant this variance, you'll allow us to proceed with this plan to the planning board. It also allow us to proceed to DOT to get their comments on whatever improvements might be necessary in the road. There is no harm, in our opinion, in what we've presented for opinions here to the public. And as a result, when you balance it, there'll be much greater harm if the application is denied. The proposal will not adversely affect values of surrounding properties. Again, the use itself is permitted by CUP, but for the two driveway, one driveway issue. It's not competing uses to the neighbors. We have gone to Conservation Commission and we've agreed to certain layout and discussions with setbacks, et cetera. We've approached the neighbors about the driveway, so everybody's aware of what we're trying to do. Number five is a hardship, and it's the same hardship arguments as to two driveways versus one driveway, as to drive-through versus the proposed application for a gas station. It's a unique lot, has some unique features, but most importantly, we have this sort of unusual law mandate regulation coming down from DOT that they look back to 1971. I find it unusual because if everybody understood that, they probably would have preserved some sort of a fashion of, driveways so that there could be reasonable use of the lot. If we were to subdivide this lot, we're still limited to one driveway. And there are reasons for that. Site distance, number of openings on Charles Bancroft, but it does present a hardship to the use of this property. We think we have a use which is permitted by conditional use, but we are unable to do so without relief, and we think our use is reasonable. So that's the second variance, and we think we meet all five criteria for that. The third is one that you previously heard, and it was previously granted, but the clock expired under the state law. You have 2 years to act, and we simply ran out of time going back and forth with the DOT and the Conservation Commission and trying to get a second driveway. So we're here again. Nothing has really changed other than the single driveway versus the two driveways. And because of that change, we really felt we ought to bring it back as well, because it is a different plan than what you saw in 2019 and granted relief on. So again, it's a variance from 803A4, where permitting a gas station with frontage along Route 3A, we have 455 feet, and 500 is required. So I'm going to touch on these requirements again. Variance will not be contrary to the public interest. The criteria of the public interest is, if you grant the variance, will it materially alter the character? Again, let's weigh what we're asking. 455 feet is what we have, and 500 is required. So is there a material difference in impact to the character of the neighborhood if we're allowed to put the proposed use, the gas station, on a lot that has only 455 feet versus 500 feet? It's an interesting ordinance because I think the purpose of the ordinance is to make sure you have adequate sight distance as you're approaching the property, to make sure you're not next door to other uses. And with that 50 feet, we feel with a difference of only 50 feet, we're not going to change the character of the neighborhood. We have that whole span of frontage and we have only one driveway. Interestingly enough, if this lot didn't have the 1971 limitation from DOT, if you had 500 feet, you could have two driveways in there. But we think one driveway is actually a benefit. And we think that there is no material alteration of the character of the neighborhood if you were to grant the relief of the 45 feet difference. There's no threat of health, safety, and welfare for all the reasons covered in 1 and 2 that I've already argued. Be in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. Again, the same as number 1, general spirit of the ordinance, general intent of your zoning ordinance is to protect property values. We don't think that less than a 10% difference in the frontage is material. Number 3, substantial justice will be done. It's reasonable to allow if there's no harm to the public. And in this case, given the layout of this property, the abutter to the north, what we're actually proposing, as suggested on Exhibit 1, will be some clearing of brush to give better line of sight as you round the corner. And so we don't think there'll be any harm to the public for losing that 45 feet of frontage as required. Number 4, there'll be no adverse impact. When we came in 2019, we asked an appraiser to look at it because we had measured 395 on an old plan. Since that time, we've had a survey and we have actually 455 feet. So we asked him to render an opinion, independent opinion. And that independent opinion is found behind Exhibit 6. And this was dated back in 2019. In response to your request, I'm pleased to submit my analysis of variance requests to allow frontage of 395 where 500 feet is required. As I said, we subsequently discovered there was 455 feet, not 393. A storage facility in an aquifer district and a storage facility not permitted under the zoning ordinance in this district. So this applies to 2 other applications. But this analysis is made to determine what effect these variances would have on surrounding properties. He describes the site. He went to the site and viewed it. It looked at the business on either side and around back behind this lot. Talks about high voltage transmission lines across the eastern tip of the property. Tree buffers are located on both sides and to the rear of the property. Subject's gas station will be on the north end of the lot near the conservation land. None of the abutters will be impacted by granting the variances to the subject. Neither business will have a significant impact on traffic count. I opine that the proposed variances will not materially alter the character of the neighborhood and will not adversely impact values of nearby properties. Number 5, hardship. Again, I think I can refer you to the tax map, which you have, which I handed out in the beginning. You can see the size, shape, the uniqueness of it. The bigger lot, of course, is the conservation lot, which is to the north. And then far above that is a lot which is sort of been the subject of some preliminary development, which will be chopped into, developed into houses eventually. So this is a rather unique parcel where it's located between conservation land. It had frontage, but it doesn't have adequate driveway opportunities. Probably, again, had they known about this ordinance requirement, may have chopped it 50 feet closer. We tried to acquire property from either neighborhood, 25 feet from either side would have helped us. We were unable to. So if you're unable to acquire the frontage and there's no other way to reasonably use this land for what it's permitted use, that is the gas station as a conditional use permit now under your ordinance, then relief should be granted if the proposed use is reasonable, and we think it's reasonable. Again, the proposed condition of approval would be driveway as proposed, as located, and with any mitigation which might be required by NHDOT or the planning board. The fourth application, again, one which was heard in 2019 and approved, but we had two driveways. The time clock has expired. We're back with a single driveway. It's a variance from Article 800, Section 801, to permit the use of a storage facility where such use is not a listed permitted use. So this one is a little bit different because this, believe it or not, storage facilities are not listed as a permitted use in the Northern Commercial District. And those of you who sat on this application understood that back in 2019. Hasn't changed. Did not become a conditional use permit. So it's still not a permitted use. And as such, we have to ask for relief. So in this case, the sort of the criteria and the observations that the board has to consider are slightly different. That is, will the variance, if it's granted, be contrary to the public interest? So the public interest, as I said, has been found. Will you materially alter the character of the neighborhood? Remember, let's look at where we're proposing to put this storage facility. It's clear that the Northern Commercial, and the words commercial are important, the Northern Commercial District, you might not want to have storage facilities. According to your town ordinance, you don't want to see them on the road. But where we're putting them is to the rear, behind a use that is permitted, and it's really going to be hardly visible. We did approach the Conservation Commission about this. They actually liked the proposed use because it doesn't have much impact on the important issues of concern for the Conservation Commission. That's the wetlands areas, the buffers to the wetlands, and the conservation land itself. It'll be somewhat benign, not a lot of noise, not much light, not much traffic impact, all of the things that would be appropriate to conservation land. And as I say, it's really not going to alter the character of the district because it's not going to be the upfront use. The character of the district is what is defined by permitted uses, and this is to the rear. There are some facilities, in fact, there are some commercial facilities, including a storage facility, so within areas of commercial districts, but just not this area. The spirit of the ordinance is observed because construction of a storage facility at the rear of the property will not change the essential character of the neighborhood. There are similar warehouse-style buildings as to what's going to be proposed, that is, warehouses. If you just go up the road, you see a number of warehouses and you see some commercial properties. This will not be that different. It'll be a storage facility. There'll be minimum septic and water requirements, so there'll be no threat to health, safety, and welfare. Could be a lot of other uses in there with greater impacts. And there'll be little traffic, so again, safety shouldn't be an issue. I think I've outlined with this application what the proposed driveway would be and what the traffic engineer said the impacts would be. This use will be considered with the front use in designing that traffic impact mitigation. Substantial justice is done because this lot is significantly impacted by wetlands. And if you turn to tab 7, you will see a map, which is a plan, an old plan, but since then we've got a new plan with new wetlands delineation, but it hasn't differed substantially from what was shown in 2019. And I think it's important to go back and revisit it, which is this identifies the area highlighted where it's actually buildable. That is the area that's not in a buffer or in a wetland. And that sort of goes to weighing what we're trying to do here. We're trying to use the land because it's usable, and yet we don't want to have much of an impact on the public. If you grant the variance, it will be a good use for the area, no harm to the public. Values of surrounding properties are not diminished by the proposed storage facility. The building will hardly, if at all, be visible to the public or abutters and does not generate as much traffic as other permitted uses. Locations to the rear. And I refer you again to Mr. Chet Rogers' opinion, which is Exhibit 6, which included the storage facility variance. And finally, literal enforcement of provisions of the ordinance will result in an unnecessary hardship. This lot, again, one of the largest uses, surrounded by wetlands, greatly impacted by the buffers to those wetlands, and it has limited ability to develop it for what the general uses under your ordinance, which would be permitted, might be. And that is community shopping functions, clusters of shops, small-scale shopping centers. That's what's listed in the Northern Commercial District. You're not going to have those kind of uses, nor do you want them back there. This type of use, requiring that type of use, imposes a hardship on this property, and we need relief, and we think our proposed use is reasonable. Again, no significant difference between the 2019 plan, which was approved, and this plan, other than the fact that we only have one driveway. So that gets us to the special exception requirement. The constraint that we have is the wetland buffers, and we tried to design around those wetland buffers as best we could. You're not, under your ordinance, section 1208 says you're not allowed to construct within the buffers to the wetlands, and we've done the best we can to do so. This is an area which is best handled by the professionals, the design engineer, the scientists, and I will quickly touch on our application, but I think, as I pointed out in Exhibit 7 and Exhibit 1, if you turn back to 1, you will see just where we're going to be causing some impacts. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Jim, let him introduce the impacts, the site, and then I'll call on the soil scientist to review the process.
Thank you, Morgan. The site itself contains wetlands in several locations. They've been mapped by a certified wetland scientist, Mark Jacobs, who's here this evening. Along the southerly border is Leech Brook, and that runs in a westerly direction and along the westerly property line, eventually about 500 feet into the Merrimack River further to the west. There is a large, poorly drained wetland really located kind of in the center and in the heart of the property here. And that wetland drains into a kind of an unnamed watercourse really along the Concom property line and also culverted through the old railroad and ultimately into the Merrimack River. Your zoning ordinance requires a 50-foot no-touch buffer, a 75-foot buffer for buildings, and a 100-foot buffer for septic systems. As previously mentioned, as Morgan went through, gas station convenience in the front, access to the back for mini storage. We have 3 buffer impact areas. Impact area A is located here. It measures about 4,000 square feet, and it's really for the purpose of providing a driveway access to the back part of the property, as does impact area B, which is here. That measures 12,290 square feet. Now, impact area A is the buffer associated with the poorly drained wetland I just mentioned. Impact area B is associated with the buffer to Leech Brook, and they overlap each other. They get very close to each other. The wetlands do not touch, but we're impacting buffer through this area, really to provide access. You see there's our stormwater basin for the gas station is located here. There's a slight buffer impact as well. Impact area C, the third impact area, is way in the back, even behind the proposed storage units, and it's buffer impact only, again. And that measures about 10,810 square feet, which in total 27,115 square feet. This particular wetland, I believe, Attorney Hollis was part of a previous special exception that the zoning board granted. It was back in 2019. It was before I was involved in the project, but there was an approval for a disturbance back in this location. We are proposing some tree pruning along the edge here, but there'll be no disturbance to the wetland. That's just to improve sight distance on the inside of that curve. No wetland impacts at all with the project. Of the buffer impacts that I alluded to, 27,000 feet, only about 8%, right in through here, will be paved. The other 92% will be loam areas that will eventually be loamed and seeded with a conservation mix. And the hope is that over time, they reconstitute a natural buffer with the type of grasses that will be achieved in that area. Overall, the project, as you can see, has 75% open space to the project, which is pretty good for our commercial development. In advance of coming here before the ZBA, we did appear before the Litchfield Conservation Commission. They provided a letter dated 2/14/22. I believe it is in your packet. Tab 5, essentially concluding, yes, that the Conservation Commission has no objections to the special exception requested within the wetland buffer. Similarly, we were asked to appear before the planning board to discuss buffer impacts. We presented the project to them. Their record reflects they had no comments on the matter. In summary, relative to this request, our approach has been to, first of all, avoid any wetland impacts, which we've, I think, successfully done. Second, to minimize the buffer impacts. We're using a slightly steeper side slope along the driveway that I would prefer to see. We're using a 3-on-1 side slope versus 4-on-1. We're also got a retaining wall behind the proposed gas station development, just so that we're not impacting more buffer, especially in this corner of the property. And actually, we downsized the width of that driveway initially from 28 feet to 24 feet. So we think that the site plan has tried to engage the Concom in receiving their comments and thoughts. A couple of those points were things that they had brought up. And we feel like we've got a well thought out plan with regard to trying to minimize the impacts on the property, on such a property where we have so many wetlands and so many buffers on the site. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
The one question I have on the special exception was, what was granted in 2019? You listed 27,000 square feet of it that's impacted. Is that value the same as it was back in 2019, roughly, or?
I don't believe so, sir. I believe this area was roughly the same. It was in the 10,000 square foot, but that plan did not reflect an actual mapping of the wetlands.
Okay.
And when Mr. Thoreau hired us in 2019, the first thing we did was hire Mr. Jacobs, a certified wetland scientist, to go out and flag those wetlands. We surveyed them, we picked up the buffers, and really, so the difference between back then, that application and this application is right in here.
Right there, yeah.
Because these wetlands kind of crept in closer together than it was originally estimated by that particular application. And so that was the difference.
Good,
Could you just, a little more explanation on what's done in the development that's it's kind of like accommodating these effects on the buffer? I mean, I see some contour lines and things like that. I'm assuming that, there's a cause and effect. You had a cause, and then there's an effect, and then I'm assuming that the design is accounting for that as well. I mean, trying to get back to somewhere close to the original state of the site before the development.
Sure. Yep. I go back to the facts that of 27,000 feet of impact, really only 2,200 are for paved surfaces. So they'll never be restored or renovated back to kind of a naturalized setting. The other 92% will be loamed and seeded with a conservation niche, and we think will be naturalized. We think, and while I know it's not the purview of this board, it's more of a planning board item, but we think the stormwater practices, the practices here, as well as here for stormwater for really kind of both ends of the project are good responsible stormwater measures that will attempt to remove pollutants that can come off of these paved surfaces before they get discharged into the buffer. And then I think just the care that went into not paving, a 15-acre site with large blocks of building and parking that would have necessitated some larger impacts. I think we've tried to do the best we can to just not impact wetlands.
So,
Thank you.
so the lot is 15 acres.
Total, yes, sir.
You have less than a half acre of impact.
Of buffer impact, correct.
Just the buffer,
Yes, the
not
buffer.
even the actual. Yep.
Yeah, we aren't in any of the wet or changing any water courses or affecting any water. It's just the 50-foot no build. One of the things that came up, and I recall in 2019, was why is the detention basin down at the bottom? And I didn't have the benefit of Jim here at the time, so I was playing amateur engineer, which is, well, it's the bottom of the drainage area. That's the best place to capture the stormwater runoff. But Jim's here this evening, so I'll ask him to sort of expound a little bit. Why would you need that? Why is that the logical place to put it? And why are you putting it there? And why does it impact the buffer the way it does?
Well, it's the lowest area of the site.
Gravity.
Gravity. That's part of it. We saw this as, it's a singular project, but it's got two different components to it. And we wanted to have a little bit of independence with this. Renee and the user up here will have the opportunity to have its treatment practice independent and its maintenance of that treatment practice independent. This outlet will then enter into this pipe system and end up back in here for a final cleansing, a second cleansing, so call it, of this location. Before it is outletted, there's actually, Morgan, somebody had built many years ago, almost like a farmer's swale here, that leads into the wetland associated with Leech Brook. And we thought that would be I like those type of locations to outlet water. You never want to outlet water at the top of a bank because it's highly erodible. So my eye immediately went to that as our outlet. This provided we had good space here without impacting any wetlands. And we thought it was a good idea to have an independent stormwater practice for the gas station.
I think the some substance of my argument back then and now is that while you could locate these stormwater drainage basins outside of the 50 feet, they wouldn't be at the lowest point on the site. So it doesn't make sense. You'd end up with basins that are not collecting what you really want to collect, and there would be some outflow that eventually gets into the buffer, that gets into the wetland, which is not treated. There are a number of criteria that Jim did a really nice job, thank you, Jim, of summarizing what it is. And I'm just going to take a minute to touch on the requirements of Section 1200, which is what we have to do as part of our special exception requirement. The following narrative addresses the criteria for granting a special exception under 1200. And this is in your application, so you've seen it. The vast majority of the buffer prevent the development of structures and land uses on and around naturally occurring and artificial wetlands, because these structures and land uses may contribute to pollution of surface or groundwater by sewage or toxic substances. As I stated, most of the buffer impacts are the construction of the stormwater management areas, both east and west, if you will, on the site. There are obviously some buffer impacts from a driveway in order to get from one site to the other because they're isolated. The stormwater management areas are designed specifically to provide qualitative and quantitative treatment measures to prevent adverse impacts to groundwater. B, prevent destruction of or significant changes to natural and artificial wetlands. This project is proposing no direct alteration of wetlands or aquatic resources. C, protect unique, ecological, sensitive, and unusual natural areas. Our inspections do not suggest they possess any unique or sensitive ecological areas. Wetlands associated with Leech Brook, which is the southern end of the site, and the poorly drained wetland located in the center of the site do not contain marshes, fens, bogs, or vernal pools. So we're not adversely impacting. If you grant the special exception, we're not doing anything adverse to those important natural areas. Protect wildlife habitats, wildlife corridors, and maintain ecological balances. It's important to note that a significant portion of the buffer impact area of this proposal is in areas previously cleared of mature trees that disrupted the original ecological balance. You've been out there, you've seen what it is. It's not a virgin wilderness. Our observations are site characteristics within the proposed impact areas did not reveal any significant wildlife corridors. We also think that because the basins will be fenced, it will allow obvious wildlife migration around the area still to continue to exist outside of the fenced area. The paving will be a Cape Cod berm paving, and it's a low-lying curb. So what we've heard over and over is the importance of transportation from one wetland area to another of certain critters, and that can occur over a Cape Cod berm. Again, this is not going to be a major roadway or even a significant driveway to a major commercial use. That's why this use we proposed is, we think, a good use. Protect potential water supplies and existing aquifers. It's our opinion that the stormwater management practices are designed to protect water supplies and to recharge aquifers. The prevent expenditure of municipal funds. We are not proposing that there would be any related to this project. This is only an impact on buffers and in a very minor way. Encourage low-intensity uses can be harmoniously appropriate and safely located in or near wetlands. Again, our impacts are for the most part stormwater management areas, and these are very compatible with buffer areas. The use or activity proposed and its attendant impacts cannot reasonably be avoided. There's no other way to access the rear portion of the property other than a driveway. We think we've done a nice job with the design of the stormwater management basins on either side of that driveway to be able to control it and prevent any pollution into the wetland. The stormwater management to the rear, I've already discussed. It can be shown at least that the least damaging route and methodology have been selected. I've talked about that, the least amount of impact possible because of the lowest point in on the site. There are no proposed improvements within the buffers which will cause wetland loss or degradation. All rainwater runoff will be connected into stormwater management bases, allowing infiltration and detention and continued flow of surface water through the detention basins onto the wetland area. No significant impact on aquatic habitat of rare or endangered species. The only development in the buffer which might impact aquatic habitat is the proposed driveway. Due to its limited size and its design, the remaining habitat will have within the buffer, there will be no significant impacts. And then number 7, it can be shown that adequate erosion and sedimentation control methods appropriate to the use are incorporated as detailed by the current recognized best management practices. As can be seen on the site plan drawings presented, acceptable erosion control methods have been incorporated in the design, and a NHDES alteration of terrain permit will also be required for this site. And they, of course, require those kind of attention to details. And then finally, it can be shown that state wetlands permits as required have been obtained. A wetlands permit is not required because we're not impacting wetlands. So those are pretty much the requirements of your special exception. As I said, with us this evening is Mark Jacobs. Should you have any questions, he did the wetlands and wildlife analysis on the site that allowed us to submit the application as presented this evening.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding the 5 cases we just, or 5 requests we just heard? No. Any members of the public or butters that want to speak or in favor or against the project or projects? Project? No. Okay. So I guess we'll close this part of the session and we'll go in deliberation. We'll take it one by one and go through it. And we may have other questions, we'll see, but we'll try to maintain.
Make a motion to close public input.
I'll
Right.
second.
Motion made and seconded to close public input. All in favor? Aye. Against? Opposed? Against? Abstained. So 4-0-0. Okay. So on case 221-2022-1, which is the get my thoughts here. It's the variance request for Article 800, Section 803-3. Zone ordinance to permit a gas station with a one access egress point where there's two required. So I kind of think the first one and the second one are the same, in my opinion, but
Me too.
they one time. So we heard the information. Obviously, we've asked our questions. I felt that all 5 criteria were covered really well, as was presented to us. I don't know if anybody else has.
So I agree with that statement as well. I think, there's two schools of thought. Whether you have a lot of entrances, seems like, people think that's safer to have, or if you've had fewer, that's fewer people entering on Charles Bancroft. So it's looked at kind of in a different way. And that's why I made the original comment, what does the fire chief think? Because that's the guy I'm worried about, because that's the guy that's going to be in an emergency. If you're a little bit delayed in getting to your gas or whatever, we kind of do that anyway. But I do want to make part of, you had brought it up, I do think, because, we're not here to determine whether you got the actual turning radiuses and everything works out and it's functional. That's not our part, but I still think we should, per your recommendation, have the conditions that it also meets planning board approval and DOT approval. I think
Yeah, we
on all those.
can certainly note it in our approval. I mean, it has to either way anyway, whether we said not.
Yeah. So
I didn't see the fire chief's approval in any of the packets, but I assume.
I talked to him personally.
All right.
So yes, has no
Okay.
no reservations whatsoever with one access point.
I think you could argue it both ways, whether it's if like you could argue that it's safer in some cases with a single entrance. So in
Right.
which case, if they become, what's the overall merit of the project itself?
Agreed. I'll take a motion on case 1. If we're done deliberating.
I'll make a motion to accept the variance.
To approve. Okay.
Approve, yes. To approve the variance for one access where 2 is required by ordinance.
I'll second.
And we can note the required planning board and DOT approvals.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 4-0-0. That variance has been approved. Moving on to the second one, which is variance request for 803. This is a gas station one. Hang on a second. I must have opened it 3 times. Huh. All right, second one is 4/18-2022-1, which is the variance for Article 800, Section 803, to allow a fast food restaurant with a takeout and or drive-through with one access/egress point where 2 are required. Well, I think all 5 criteria seem to be for the same reasons for the first one we just approved. I agree with the same, requirements, make sure it's approved by the planning board and et cetera. So
I agree.
Agree.
I'll take a motion. Yeah, we had an agreement.
I said it second.
Yeah, I know.
I'll make the motion to accept the fast food restaurant with one access point where 2 is required by the ordinance.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion made and seconded. Any other discussion? Okay, then all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Variance passed 4-0-0. All right, moving on. Second one. Third one, sorry. the numbering, the way we do case numbers are confusing. Case 4/18/2022-2, which is the third case of the evening. Variance for zoning ordinance Article 800, Section 803, to allow a gas station with frontage along Route 3A of 455 feet where 500 feet is required. So it's all the same, somewhat the same argument as the first two, a little very different, obviously.
Yeah, and if you notice, it's not like the butters are right there. I mean, there's 500 feet. You just
Correct.
don't own the 500 feet, but it still meets the 500 feet.
Yeah.
So
The lines, the sight lines are perfect from there and everything like that, from my perspective.
And this is where having one entrance is actually better than
Probably.
two. So.
And I did hear the comment that whatever is required for turnouts and stuff like that on 3A, the developer will deal with those
Be
issues.
approved by DOT.
And, yeah, planning, correct.
Right.
But the frontage has also changed though, since 2019, it's grown from
Right.
393 linear feet to 455 linear
yeah,
feet.
I think that was.
And
a
it was
measurement
approved in
error, right?
2019
Yeah,
already.
Yeah,
it was a measurement error.
And it was approved in 2019. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't approve it now
exactly.
with additional stuff. Okay. So if there's no more discussion, I'll take a motion.
I motion to approve the what was it, 459 feet as opposed to the
55.
455 as opposed to the 500 feet required.
Motion made. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion or further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
I,
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carried 4-0-0. So that one's approved. Moving on to the third one.
fourth one.
Fourth one. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. There.
Yep.
Fourth one. Thank you. Let's see. This is 4/18/2022-3. Variance for LZO Article 800, Section 801, to allow the use of a storage facility where such use is not permitted use.
Use, that's right.
Again, this one was approved in 2019. I'm not sure why we wouldn't change that decision, but
I think the point was well taken. It's not visible from the roadway. It's basically on the back end of the site. It's been adjusted. I think the concern where it was a non-approved or use would be if it was right there on the
from the
front.
highway frontage, yeah.
I think it meets the intent of that by being in the back of the site.
In addition, the conservation was in agreement with the usage too, so use of the property. Okay, if there's no other questions or discussion, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the use of the storage facility in a zone that doesn't approve or doesn't normally approve that use.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries 4-0-0. So here's the big one. 4/18/2022-4, which is a special exception from LZO Article 1200, Section 1208, to construct within the buffers of the wetlands within the Wetland Conservation District. So again, it was approved in 2019. I'm not sure why we would not approve it again. They're taking good measures to not have a major impact to the space.
There's a definite sensitivity to the effect of the property and how so I see the effort to where it would meet all our criteria here.
In addition, we have a
Letter from conservation.
conservation is in agreement with the plan, and we're appear to be in support of. So, do we want to note that for the exception that it doesn't exceed the 27,150?
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and to quote the plan as proposed is is reflective of some great ways to minimize impact and preserve the conservation of the area. I think those could be part of the motion.
Do I have a motion then?
Okay, I'm a motion to approve the,
Special
say
exception.
that, just the buffer, yeah, the effect on the buffer, on the wetlands buffers.
So motion to approve the special exception for 12008.
With the exceptions which be noted.
Right. Not to exceed 27,150 square feet impact of existing land. And as planned.
Is there an exact amount of square footage?
It's in the application, sir, 27115, I believe.
I gave him a little wiggle. I said
Yep.
150. Thank you. Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second. You first. Go ahead.
Jerry. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries 4-0-0. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the detailed presentation.
Thank you for your time, patience. We got there.
Renee,
Thank you again.
we tried for the 5, but you know what? You did good with 4.
We were good. Thanks for the effort. Appreciate it. Have a nice evening.
Take care.
So I will turn the meeting back over to Chairman Gandia.
So the next case on the agenda is case number 718-2022-1, a special exception from LZO, Article 1200, Section 1208, for the temporary wetland impact for equipment access and replacement of 15 utility structures within the Wetland Conservation District in the right-of-way from the Merrimack River to just east of Brickyard Drive. Name of applicant, Public Service of New Hampshire, DBA Eversource Energy. Owner of property, Whitney Realty Trust in Mel's Funway Park LLC. Location of property, right-of-way between Merrimack River, west of Charles Bancroft Highway and Brickyard Road in Litchfield, New Hampshire. Map 9, lots 1, 3, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, and 88. And who will be presenting tonight?
Hi, my name is Kate Wilkins with Time Bond.
And I am Kurt Nelson with Eversource. I'm a licensing and permitting specialist.
If you want to proceed.
Katie, the floor is yours.
Okay.
So this application is for a special exemption request for temporary work within the conservation, the Wetland Conservation District within an Eversource right-of-way. It's Eversource right-of-way line K165 and H123. They run parallel to one another. It's 2 lines within one right-of-way. As was stated, we're working from west of the Merrimack River across Bancroft Highway to Brickyard Road. The idea is that we're going to be replacing 15 aging structures along that right-of-way. They're all existing structures on both the K117 and H123, so 15 in total within that stretch. We're going to be replacing the existing wooden structures with steel structures just to maintain longevity in the long run, and overall electrical needs have changed in the grand scheme of things. Less woodpecker holes also. So with that, there is some existing access. If you go west of Bancroft towards the Merrimack River, there's an existing gravel access road. There are 3 culvert crossings that are already in place along that gravel route, and we'll be building some gravel work pads around each of the structure locations that have been outlined in the plan set that was provided in the application. All of the proposed poles are going to be direct in bed, so they're just going to be bored into the ground, set into a caisson. It's kind of like a CMP, metal CMP, and then structures placed and backfilled from there. Some of the areas, in particular east of Charles Bancroft, it's a very wet area. Ty and Bond went out and delineated the wetlands and confirmed the wetlands back in April of 2022. just a couple months ago, and it was quite saturated. So through that, most of that area, pretty much the entire stretch, any of the work pads and access routes are going to be timber mats are going to be used to access those. They're just larger, people call them crane mats, construction mats, 16-foot long by 4-foot wide, timbers lashed together. Standard BMP for accessing within wetlands to help minimize ground disturbance and overall vegetation disturbance in the grand scheme of things. So once the work is completed, all of those will be removed right away, and the site will be left to restore as is. None of the vegetation will be removed at that point in time, and everything usually just pops right back up, which is nice. Yeah, so that's the gist of the project itself. We have proposed 45,798 square feet of temporary vegetated wetland impacts. So the areas that we're actually matting within the wetland, that includes that area in particular. If you want, I can run through the provisions of the exemption. If that's the next step. Okay.
There's lots of them.
Yeah.
45,000 feet, is that like an acre's worth of land approximately?
Yeah.
Approximately.
Thank you.
So as we run through the ordinance and the requirements for the special exemption, item 1, proposed use, construction, or alteration shall be constructed in such a way that does not unduly restrict the flow of water. The project proposes temporary impacts to vegetated wetlands for the replacement of the existing transmission line structures. The proposed project was designed to minimize temporary impacts to the wetlands through the use of timber matting. The matting will be temporary, providing access to work areas around the replacement structures and removed once construction is complete. The matting will be installed in such a manner as to not restrict the flow of water. Some of the methodology used for that is using runners instead of placing mats flat on the ground. They'll put runners so that water can flow underneath the main stringer that they're working on. So water and everything can flow through. Standard best management practices, including the installation and maintenance of erosion control barriers, will be used during construction. On top of all of this, Eversource always has an environmental monitor on site weekly, checking out the site, making sure erosion sediment controls are in place. Timber matting is clean, and the site's all tidy. So, and those reports they usually Ty and Bond or another consultant will do those inspections and report to Eversource, and we work closely with the contractors to make sure that gets addressed. So item 2, the proposed use is not in conflict with any and all of the proposed and intentions listed in section 12,000.01 of this ordinance. The project proposes to maintain the K165 and H123 transmission line, which is located within an existing and maintained right-of-way. The utility structures will be replaced in their current alignment, and there is no expansion of the existing right-of-way or installation of additional structures. The new poles will be installed within 5 to 10 feet of the existing structures, approximately 5 to 10 feet higher than the existing utility structures due to updated National Electric Safety Code requirements that are not anticipated to discourage the purposes and intentions listed in sections 100 or 1200.01 of the Litchfield zoning ordinance. 3, the use or activity proposed and its intended impacts cannot reasonably be avoided because there are no alternatives to and less impact than maintain the safety and reliability of the existing transmission line. The proposed project has been designed to utilize existing historic access roads along the right-of-way where possible and minimize impacts to the wetlands. Particularly on the west side, we're going to be using the existing access routes and just creating spurs off to directly access the structures. And then the east side, trying to most of it's wet, so trying to stay within the existing pathways that were created years and years ago and not creating new routes through the wetlands and sticking where we can. And if there's areas of uplands, trying to utilize those, even though we'll most likely be using upland timber matting as well to just avoid impacts to adjacent wetlands and running up any adjacent areas. Number 4, it can be shown that the least damaging route and methodology has been selected and that and that which is being proposed is best practicable alternative available. There are no alternatives to less impact than that are less impactful that maintain the safety and reliability of the existing transmission line. Again, the project has been designed to utilize existing access routes and minimize impacts to wetlands where possible. 5, it can be shown that reasonable and acceptable impact mitigation measures have been incorporated where necessary and appropriate to minimize wetland loss and degradation. The access for the project has been cited to avoid wetlands to the greatest extent feasible and utilize existing access routes where possible. The proposed project has been designed to minimize temporary wetland impacts through the use of timber matting. Matting will be temporarily placed in wetlands where required to provide appropriate work areas and prevent rutting. Standard best management practices, including the installation and maintenance of erosion control barriers, will be used during construction. 6, no significant impacts on the aquatic habitat of rare or endangered species as listed by the state of New Hampshire or federal government will result. Did I do the wrong one? No. Okay, I was right. Wrong page. Listed species were identified by the Natural Heritage Bureau. Standard best management practices typically used within right-of-ways in coordination with New Hampshire Fish and Game will be incorporated into the activities on site. Prior to daily construction activities, timber matting will be reviewed by a monitor trained in wildlife identification, and observed turtles and snakes will be safely relocated off the active work zone and to similar nearby habitat. Observed turtles and snakes will be moved off construction access roads to prevent mortality during construction, and will be reported to New Hampshire Fish and Game. Erosion control matting, if utilized, will be consisting of jute matting. Matting with plastic mesh will be avoided to limit unintentional mortality of snakes. We're still in coordination with NHB and New Hampshire Fish and Game at this point in time. They have quite a bit to review, so they're still going through what our standard BMPs would be. But those are what we typically do for areas that have snakes and turtles, which both of this site does have. We don't have any rare plants at this location, but there are snakes and turtles.
So does the New Hampshire Fish and Game give you what they feel is the best management practices, and then you use those? Is that how that works?
Ultimately, yeah, the way the process works is that we provide Fish and Game information relative to the project, work scope, etc. We'll typically propose standard sets of best management practices, but ultimately Fish and Game has the last say in terms of what ultimately transpires on site. So, yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
7, it can be shown that adequate erosion and sediment control methods appropriate to the use are incorporated as detailed by the current recognized BMPs, e.g. Stormwater Management and Erosion and Sediment Control Handbook for Urban and Developed Areas in New Hampshire, Rockingham County, Conservation District, New Hampshire, and Soil Conservation Service, August 1992, as amended. Access for the proposed project has been cited to avoid wetlands to the greatest extent feasible and utilize existing access roads where possible. The proposed project has been designed to minimize temporary wetland impacts through the use of timber matting. Matting will be temporarily placed in wetlands to provide appropriate work areas and prevent rutting. Standard BMP practices, including installation and maintenance of erosion control barriers, will be used during construction. Similar standard erosion controls are straw wattles. We're trying to move away from the plastic netting on a lot of the erosion controls. That's an Eversource process. So a lot of it will be the fabric wattles, just to avoid wetland impacts to wildlife mostly. A lot of those get installed right at the entrance of construction areas, right before it hits the timber mats. If necessary, some of the ones with the mulch will be placed along the timber mats just because they hold better. You don't have to stake them in the ground if it's deemed necessary. Each. 8, it can be shown that state wetland permits as required have been obtained. This project does qualify for a statutory permit by notification. The SPNs are going to be submitted within the next week. mostly because we do have direct impacts to wetlands, even if they're temporary in nature, but they fall within the utility provisions under the SPN process.
Could you explain that process a little bit more? The SPN process, what is that?
Yeah, it's almost it's a permit by notification in a way. So we fill out the form and note where our wetland impacts are, submit that to DES. They review based on what we show for the plans. And we cite that we have the utility exemptions within that, and they provide comment back. And most of the time it's a pretty straightforward.
Yeah, because so much of our work is very uniform. Yeah, so it used to be called a utility maintenance notification. Then when the regulations changed in 2019, they changed the verbiage to statutory permit by notification. And there's several varieties. There's roadway maintenance, there's forestry. We fall under the utility SPN process. So.
Thank you.
So I believe that covers everything.
Okay,
we
thank
need
you.
to go through.
Does the board have any questions?
I have a couple questions. So we talked about all the methods, and I apologize, I left my printed copy on my desk, but I just want.
I was like, would you
looked at
like
it.
one?
I think I guess my question is more duration, time of construction, and then I kind of was. I'll follow on, give you both my questions at the same time. How this is done? Is it sequential? Is it all the matting's done across the whole way, or are you doing it as you go along? And then I'm trying to figure out the duration the matting's down. Is
Okay.
where I'm headed.
Yeah, great question. I'm actually a fill-in tonight, so I do know the timing is a little bit to be determined. What usually drives, and this project's fairly small scope. This is a small smattering of structures. I would anticipate this construction could take place over the timeframe of about 2 months. The timing is largely driven by the transmission outage schedules. So we need to get outages on the lines when doing the work. And that is quite a choreograph trying to get those things to line up just right. So the civil work, the laying down of mats and gravel access, that can happen prior to the outage, but the line work itself, the actual, when you're touching conductors, things like that, you want to be under an outage. So usually it's time to make sure your civil work is done ahead of the outage. This scope of work will happen fairly rapidly. I'm quite sure.
Yeah.
Because we're, I would guess it's, like I said, I'm not privy to the outage schedule, but I would anticipate sequence. You'll see civil matting getting laid down. I would assume they would do all the matting first, and then the line crew would come in at some point.
Part of the
thereafter.
site prep everything.
Right.
I'm just trying to figure out.
Yep.
I can't remember the exact number. Whatever thousands of square
Yeah.
feet. Is it all at the same time, or is it just
This one
sequential
given
throughout?
the location of it, and they're all pretty much close together,
Right.
they'll have the civil crews come out, lay out all the matting, get everything prepped, and then so all of it will most likely be laid
Okay.
at the same time, as much as you can lay it all at the same time. And then the drilling crews come in, drill the locations for the poles get set, and then usually line crews come in and transfer all of the wires from the old poles to the new poles and wreck everything out.
There is under the wetlands rules, we're not that we're going to be anywhere close to this, but there is a requirement that matting not be down longer than one growing season. Otherwise, you are kicked out of a minimum impact wetlands permit category into a higher level permit.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, that was.
But-
I knew there was something. I didn't know what it
Yeah.
was, but that kind of. I just wanted to make sure that we were going to be within.
right.
I mean, you can put it down and everything's great, but you can't leave it there.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
did mention you're going to bring it. It all comes
Yeah.
back at the end.
It
But
does. Yeah.
it's a
There's
3-year-long project, which this one obviously isn't.
No.
Just want
Yeah,
to make sure we're aware of how much at one time and how long is it down.
This outage schedule is for early middle of September. So they'll try to work putting down construction mats in August. We have our outage later on when they can actually transfer the line and do a lot of the line work just for clearances. And then we're expecting these to be out within the fall. So
Is this similar to the work that was done down that area like 2 years ago?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. have seen us, I'm sure, far too often. We're,
I thought it was already done. That's why I saw the price.
yeah,
Isn't this already
we've been picking away throughout the state. We've been on the golf course recently, a year or two ago.
Okay.
We were able to complete all those structure change outs. So yeah, this type of work is very commonplace for us right now. We have lots of work going on in the state and surrounding towns, Londonderry, Hudson. We have, right now in Hudson, we have a project with over 200 structure replacements going on, so. And we have been made aware by Fish and Game that they consider this area to be fairly sensitive for reptiles, turtles, snakes, etc. And we have worked with them quite diligently on the development of some very serious best management practices, monitoring, use of exclusion fencing, all kinds of stuff. So I know Fish and Game has sort of ramped up their expectations for us in terms of the best management practices for wildlife, rare species. So we're continuing to work with them and improve on those processes. So.
Any other questions from the board? I'm going to bring it out to the public. Anybody in the public in favor of the application that would like to speak? There are none. Anybody in opposition to the application that would like to speak? There are none. Anyone with questions that would like to speak? There are none. All right, so I'll take a motion to close public input.
Make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I do have two letters that I want to read into the record. The first is a letter dated July 11th, 2022 from the Litchfield, Joe McKibben, Vice Chair of the Litchfield Conservation Commission, to the Litchfield Zoning Board of Adjustment regarding Eversource line. The Litchfield Conservation Commission met with representatives for the above project on 7/7/2022. We have voted in the affirmative for the project to replace wooden utility poles with steel poles with a temporary impact to the wetlands of 45,798 square feet with the following conditions. Conservation Commission to receive the final report from New Hampshire Fish and Game, Non-Game Division on Rare and Endangered Species, best management practices for the area, the building inspector or his representative to conduct pre and post inspection of the area. Please do not hesitate to contact me with any questions or concerns. Again, that's from Joan McKibben, the vice chair. And the second letter is from Jeffrey Blackwell, the health officer for the town of Litchfield, dated June 30th. Zoning Board of Adjustment, based on my review of the proposed project for the replacement of the utility structure on line K165 and H123 in Litchfield, I have no comment to offer as a health officer at this time. Please do not hesitate to contact me with any questions or concerns you may have. And Jeff, did the planning board have any comment on this?
I do not believe so. I did
Okay.
not receive anything from
I
them.
didn't get anything either.
Right.
Okay. It was sent to them though, right? As
Yes.
part of the process.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions from the board for the applicant? All right, then we can go into, did you want to add anything before we go into our deliberations?
No, if
Okay.
there was any more questions.
All right. Any thoughts before we begin?
I didn't see anything wrong with the process. I was actually intrigued by the critter concept because I heard a lot about the plants and how, and then it went right into how they were going to ensure that they were trying to help the critters along. And I said, oh, that's actually pretty cool. And getting the state involved is a really great way to go. I'm assuming that if we do approve that, they'll have no issues working with our Conservation Commission to get that material for them. So
That would
maybe in
be-
our motion, we'll
Exactly.
request that.
Anything else? I did have a couple of thoughts, Jerry, to follow up on you. I don't know if this is something the board even wants to entertain, but to limit the time for construction, if it's not done by
Yeah.
a certain amount of time, they come back in and we just
Yep.
make sure that we know what's happening with the wetlands out there. I
Yep.
don't know if anybody has any thoughts to that.
As long as it's a reasonable amount of time.
Right.
I mean, I would say 3 months. Sounds like that's what it's going to take anyway.
But if it was to not happen this year, I'd rather not see it happen next year in April. That's when the critters are born, and
I would think at that point, the state would probably say no anyway. But yeah.
Okay, so we want to limit that we want it construction to be done by,
Calendar year.
I think, December 31st,
Yeah, that
2022.
makes sense. Yeah.
oh yeah,
That makes perfect sense. Otherwise, you have to come back for another approval.
And I know there was mention about they were going to have, when we were talking about the proposed use construction, shall be constructed in a way that does not unduly restrict the flow of water. It's mentioned that there will be an environmental monitoring report that's done during that time. I'm wondering if that's something that should be, the town should be looped in and be sent to you and to the Conservation Commission.
The Conservation Commission, for
Sure.
sure.
That's my
Yeah.
confirmation, yeah.
Okay.
So these are kind of things that we can learn about our land and property. So this is helpful for future growth of the town.
So that's going to be sent to. And my other thought was, I know we talked about the New Hampshire Fish and Game recommendations, and they're working with them. I would like to see, I think, a condition that they follow all recommendations from the New Hampshire Fish and Game for best management practices.
agreed.
And then we would incorporate the Conservation Commission letter into the approval.
It's good.
Good?
Yep.
Good. All right, then I will make the motion to
Good, since you can remember it all.
This is helpful. Thank you.
to grant
I was like, oh, should I be taking?
A lot of clauses.
to grant the applicant's request for a special exception from LZO Article 1200, Section 1208, for temporary wetland impacts for the equipment access and replacement of 15 utility structures within the Wetland Conservation District in the right-of-way from the Merrimack River to just east of Brickyard Drive, with the following condition: that all construction shall be completed by 12/31/2022. All environmental monitoring reports shall be sent to the town building inspector, Jeffrey Blackwell, and to the Conservation Commission. The project, the applicant shall follow all recommendations from the New Hampshire Fish and Game for best management practices. And the two conditions in the July 11th letter from the Conservation Commission, which are Conservation Commission to receive the final report from New Hampshire Fish and Game on rare and endangered species best management practices for the area, and the building inspector or his representative to conduct pre and post inspection of the area.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes 5-0-0. Thank you. Okay, thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Appreciate your time.
So the next case on the agenda is case number 718-2022-2, variance from LZO Section Article 300, Section 310, to encroach 6 feet into the 20-foot rear setback for the construction of a deck with stairs to grade. Name of applicant, Christina and Matthew King. Owner of property, Christina and Matthew King. Location of property, 11 Whittemore Drive, Litchfield, New Hampshire. Map 13, Lot 3. That's you.
So she's usually asleep by now. So
And if you can just introduce yourselves before you start.
My name is Christina King, one of the property owners,
Matthew King, her husband.
also
Great.
property owner.
Property owner, come on.
She's the brain, so let her do it.
So if you just want to go through the 5 points for us,
Um,
or however you want to proceed.
do you have like the photos? Do you need photos or the maps or anything like that?
Let's see what
We have the plans. I don't know if any photos. We have the plans.
We have the
Well, the
plans.
That's
Yes,
what-
that's what I meant by
okay.
photos. Yeah.
I don't know if you were sending pictures of the backyard and trees and all.
I do have supplemental photos, but they're not really necessary, just for fun if you want to see them. All right, so what we're requesting is just to encroach the setback line in the rear of the property, which has a 20-foot setback. We're asking for relief of 6 feet into that. We're going to, or we would like to build a covered deck on the second floor of our ADU on our garage. So I'll go through the points. The variance will not be contrary to the public interest because it cannot be seen from the street or by any of the surrounding neighbors. It faces the conservation land, which is what the rear of our property is. It's on the back side of the garage. The spirit of the ordinance is observed because it only encroaches the setback by 6 feet. We do not have an abutter in the rear. It is conservation land, so the ordinance is to encourage separation of abutters and I would say privacy of those abutters. So it doesn't face or interfere with any of those neighbors. Substantial justice is done because no harm is done to the general public, the abutting properties, or the conservation land. And the variance would avoid a hardship of having to move the entire building that we're building forward 6 feet. The values of the surrounding properties are not diminished because this would likely add value to those surrounding properties by raising our property value and theirs by raising the neighborhood average. The construction would be done by a reputable local crew with composite materials that are made to last 20 years. So it's not like we're going to have to keep redoing it every few years. Literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. The deck will stay completely within our property and not encroach on any wetlands or the conservation area as we're within our property line. The house is set back 73 feet from the street, causing the rear yard of the main dwelling and garage and ADU to be really shallow to the setback line. Building the deck on the left side of the ADU, if we were to do that instead, would face one of our abutters, could potentially be uncomfortable for them, and it could also have an odd look to an appearance to the house. We also plan to add a carport for a third vehicle on that side, so we wouldn't be able to do that if that were the case. Building the garage further away from the setback line would result in the property losing its original characteristics to match abutting properties. The garage would look out of place and overbearing compared to the house, or it would result in less square footage to the ADU in order to keep the look similar to the house. And the last point, this is a custom covered deck built for my recently widowed aunt who's going to be moving into our ADU. She's going to be retiring, selling her home of 20 years, and this was her one special request, that she just wanted a porch so that she could watch the birds in her own space that wouldn't be shared by us, and she can relax all year round.
What's an ADU?
Accessory dwelling unit.
Okay, thanks.
That was the same question I had.
How big is the deck planned to be?
It's 6 feet deep by 16 feet wide, and then the staircase leading up to the deck is 4 feet wide by 13 feet
Thanks.
long.
Did conservation weigh in at all on this application? And it's their property that we're butting or encroaching. No?
So I'm looking at your, the plan. So the tan is all what you're going to be adding on, is that? I don't know if my color scheme is just different.
It tends the existing ADU plans, right? That's being built.
So the green area behind that 36-foot tan block is the proposed deck.
Right, so what's existing now?
Just the white.
Just the white, so just the
Existing
existing
dwelling.
dwelling, so.
So the dashed setback is right up against that building.
Yes.
Yeah, the corner of the house is that way too.
So it's exactly
great.
6 feet.
And the
from-
existing porch already encroaches in the space.
Yeah.
The existing porch on the existing house?
I think it's just, oh, yes,
So
the
that,
existing deck, yes.
So that must already have a variance on the setback.
so this
I
right
would
here.
assume anyway.
That's- Right, okay. Yeah, that was prior owners, yeah,
Okay.
So that right here is encroach, what is that?
yes.
Is that,
Deck.
That's the existing deck of the existing house.
that's already encroaching.
Right. When I first read it, I didn't realize there was an existing deck that was encroaching.
That already violates
already
the
encroached.
buffer.
Yeah.
So that's already encroaching. And then when you go from the existing dwelling to the middle, is that like an attachment, like a breezeway?
Breezeway, yep,
With two front porch and a back porch.
So that green is porches on the front and the back?
yes.
And then the proposed garage, is the ADU above the garage? Is that what's happening?
Mhm.
So ADU is above the garage. And is there a deck above, like for the ADU? Like a patio?
That's what the variance would be for, is that
Right, but is
second level.
Oh, so it is a second level deck?
Yeah, so
above.
the entrance is inside of the garage. You access through the breezeway. This would be an additional external entrance.
So I see two green, right? I see one that says proposed deck above, so that's the second balcony.
Yes.
And then the green right next to that, that's going to be an additional encroachment for a deck off the back of the
It's not,
garage.
it's not
No.
encroaching though. It's within their own space. That's already, I'm
Yeah.
assuming already been approved.
No,
Yes.
this right here. What's that?
That's it. Yeah, second floor. I thought you were talking one.
No,
by
no,
the
so I'm saying
breezeway.
this is one encroachment.
That's,
Those are the
that's,
stairs.
that's the stairs.
Stairs.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
the
those are the stairs going up the deck.
So this is just going up to the second floor deck.
Right.
That's the second floor deck.
That's what's being encroached.
Gotcha. So the stairs and the second floor deck are encroaching.
Yes.
So this back deck that's gonna have is that the second means of egress to the ADU?
It's not required. They've already got their primary. The secondary will be the windows.
Secondary is a window?
Yeah. Yep.
Any other questions on the board?
I was just kind of, so you're thinking that if it's an accessible, it would be permitted in the setback.
No,
Okay.
it's still not permitted.
Right.
But I just figured if it was if it was considered the second means of egress, to me, it's probably better and a safer situation.
Yes.
I would say it's
Would
safer
be,
than those.
yes.
I would say it's
But
safer
not-
than a set of windows to jump out of, but
Yeah.
If the other deck wasn't already there, already encroaching, I wouldn't be in favor of it, but it's already there and it's already existing today. And there's no feedback from the conservation. Why would we not allow it? I get right to the point, but
Is there any feedback from any abutters? Because had to be notified. Am I correct?
No, I don't. I mean, Jerry has a file. I don't think so.
Nothing.
yeah, I didn't see
Did nothing.
I don't see anybody in the audience.
No, keep looking. Don't-
No, I just wanted to refresh my memory. I feel kind of silly leaving everything up.
I mean, we're talking about 6 feet.
6 feet.
6 feet.
Is it a complete wooded area behind the house?
That's all
In the
conservation.
back, complete, yeah.
It's behind the middle school.
And the thing is, the conservation may not have known that this was their land because it just went to the town of Litchfield. It could be-
That's, I'm sorry. Yes, they do.
But I don't know. if
They're
they-
aware.
Okay.
Again, I'd have a whole different
Not
attack.
that they took it up at a meeting, but I
But they,
know.
right, because sometimes it
Yes.
just gets put in a
Yes.
pile.
If the other deck wasn't there, I'd have a different thought.
It doesn't bother you if that other deck is there. in
It's already
violation?
there.
I know, but
We
it's-
have to assume it's already a variance on it.
Don't put, no, you can't assume that. The people
Well,
do
Our
stuff
building
all the time.
inspector, I just
He
asked the
didn't say
question.
that there
I
was a
didn't
variance.
It was before, I know, before your time, but
So the deck actually
So-
violates further into the buffer than this 6 feet. is.
yeah, this one looks like it's
That's
going
kind
good,
of, I kind of share your point, John.
about 12 or,
But that
15
deck
feet into
didn't
the-
receive proper variance for it. Just because somebody built it doesn't mean we just throw the regulations out the window.
understood. I understood the
Next
damage is already
question-
done.
The
I'm
next
just,
question would be then, how old is the home that's there now?
It's built in 76.
Only on paper.
No, but I mean, part of the thing is we don't ask for. And I see, I do ask for previous zoning, and nothing was put in yes or no. So that's why we ask for that on our applications as to what it is, so we don't get into situations like this, but it's blank.
understood, but I don't think the applicants may not be even aware.
I know, but part of filling out the application is to have that information, so we don't get into.
Have you
back and
seen our
forth
records in
with
that background?
that's not an excuse not to know what's happening on a
I'm
particular
just
property.
saying, it's not an excuse, but
Okay,
do we have the folder in the back row?
I don't,
Well,
I don't, I
Included in
couldn't
the
find it.
folder.
I couldn't find
so there's no folder.
paperwork.
It could be that the deck was just constructed without proper permits and approval, and that happens.
Don't
more
even,
than
you
what we
don't
think.
even, don't even.
But,
Yes, it
but
does.
that's
I
what I'm
know.
saying. So for us to say because an existing structure is there, that shouldn't be there, that should change our analysis, I think has some flaws.
It doesn't change, for me, it weighs a little bit. It doesn't change the look and feel of the backyard, it doesn't change the lines, it does probably provide additional egress out of that, out of that ADU. I'm inclined to support it personally, but
What about putting that deck on the side so it's not encroaching?
I think what was stated, well, first it'll be visible from the public street at that point. Now it's no longer secluded or private.
Yeah, but if you put it here, that's what I'm
It'd be available from the street, and it would no longer be secluded.
You
That
got
would be
70
directly facing our abutters too.
if 62 feet from the park, from the butter to that. park.
Understood. I understand.
73 feet from
When
it's a
I-
cul-de-sac.
When I first read the application, that was my first go-to. Why are we bothering if it didn't go on the other side? But based on what's on the side, it's going to be now seen from the street. You don't see most porches for seclusion in the sides of the yard.
So there was no opportunity to move it 6 feet forward?
It would affect the characteristics of the house.
That would
And
push
we would get closer to the front setback line as well. And we do plan to put a carport on that left side of the garage. So that's another reason why we want it in the back.
Yeah, pushing that garage 6 feet forward that makes the house set way back. It would be kind of odd looking from the street.
Yeah, right.
So where it says 24, that's where you're going to put the garage.
That's where we would put the carport, which is basically just a parking space.
Then you'd have to do like a driveway to get from there to your existing driveway.
Yes.
Yeah,
Basically, you'd go like this, right?
Something like that.
it's a 2-car garage, right? Or is
Yes.
that, yeah.
Two.
I would have assumed the garage, the driveway would be designed with a flare out.
It will be.
Yeah, well, that's another project for another day.
At this time of year, it's pretty expensive too.
Yeah.
Power ain't cheap.
Any other comments from the board? No questions?
No.
All right, I'm going to open it up for public input. I'm just going to let the record reflect that there's nobody here for public input. So we don't have any public input on this application, and we didn't receive anything in the file as well. Did you want to add anything before we close public input?
I don't think so.
I'll take a motion to close public input.
I'll make
Second.
that motion.
And seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so now we're in public input. Thoughts, questions, concerns?
Well, I've never been a believer of just because something else is wrong and make something right. So there is some merit to that idea, but I still think it would have to stand on its own. I think the fact that it's completely hidden and all the other options, I didn't want to get into redesigning it. Like, could you make it 6 feet shorter? I mean, what's the depth of the garage? We're not here to redesign it. We're here to just try to sort of figure it out.
Yeah, the spirit of the ordinance isn't violated, only because there's nothing on that side. There's no
See, I think
butter
that's-
that's going to be violated.
That's the
by
merit
ouching
itself.
the buffer.
In fact, I think the merit comes for the fact that it's actually, if you want it private and secluded, it's hidden. I mean, there used to be the good old days. We all sat on the front porch and waved to our neighbors and stuff. But there's a lot of value in just, hey, getting away from it all and not having to look at your neighbors and stuff. So 6 feet, I mean, obviously there's a reason why they have setbacks. And I think a lot of it has to do, as it was explained, that that's your neighbor. In this case, your neighbor is a lot of
Frogs.
Conservation land,
conservation land. And
critters.
I mean, I feel if every attempt was made to not do it, and this just happens to be the nature of the site and everything, which I think you sort of proven, like I said, without getting into a design exercise together. But So,
Do we know the history of that conservation land? Because even the house itself is set way back. It's set into the setback, just the corner right in the setback, right up against the line. So it didn't really give itself for any future growth to begin with. But was that always conservation land, or did it recently become conservation land since 1972?
I don't know.
Again, this is like we've seen this type of case before where there's a house and all of a sudden something changes behind it, and now it's either encroaching, or there's no place they can go with their property because of whatever. And the garage is sort of a standard-sized garage. It's 24 foot deep. That's typical, I believe.
yeah, you're not going to get any shorter than that. Like I said, I don't. We had a similar thing a couple of months ago where I was like, geez, a little design tweak, you wouldn't even have to be here. But they were hard set on, they wanted it that way. So in this case, I don't see that to be similar.
And what about if they just put everything on the other side?
Oh, the Litchfield is on the other side.
Yeah, that's another problem you have when you have property, the leach field, and where's the secondary leach field going to be?
So I think the important factor to note is it's not seen from the street. It'll be not seen at all. And there's nobody on the other side that's going to lose that 6 feet closer to them. So, I mean, you always talk about street appeal and things like this. It seems to me like I don't know. You always, everyone's got a good excuse for getting into setback. And so you just try to, how do you decipher between which is a good excuse? So I think the merits of these is that it doesn't become there's nothing about this that would be visible to the public except for some trees in the back. So I think that's where the merit lies in here, not with an existing issue or something like that. Because we all buy houses, we fall in love with them, and then we find out the previous owner did some stupid things probably shouldn't have done. So
I'm going to agree with you that if it was a property owner behind non-conservation, I would have a different opinion.
yeah,
Because it is trees and it's not going to change by the nature of the conservation land. And the Conservation Commission didn't weigh in.
so you start to see a lot of the new development, everything gets so close. I mean, you can get on your deck, but that's great because your neighbor's right there too. You can shake hands in some cases.
Fast drinks back and forth, yeah.
Yeah, so we're not into that situation where we're creating that. So I think, like, again, there's merit in that piece, part of it too.
Anything else? All right. Somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the variance. I'll make a motion that we approve the variance for LZO Article 300, Section 310, the encroachment of 6 feet into the 20-foot rear setback of a construction of a deck with the stairs to grade for property at 11 Widowmore Drive, map 13, lot 3.
I'll second.
Just for purposes of discussion, we didn't go through the 5 points, but we believe that they met the 5 points based on the presentation.
Yes.
Yep.
Right.
All right.
I assumed that we already deliberated. We already assumed that. So sorry.
We can deny the motion and go back if we had to. All right. So any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good. And that's 500.
Awesome. Do we need
That's
to do
how you
anything
can
else?
go.
No. We'll have to
Well, it's better if you jump up and kick your feet and go Yahoo.
He knows I want to.
So
There's a 30
we'll
day.
send you a notice of decision that you'll have, and then you can apply for your building permit.
And I think it's a 30-day wait period in case there's any issues. Is that correct?
There's a 30-day appeal period. So
Yeah,
if
appeal
you start building within that 30 days and somebody comes in appeals and they're successful on their appeal, then you would have to cease and
Okay.
remove that building.
So
So
30 days from today, that's
From
calendar
today.
days.
right. That's saying you can't move forward, but you move forward at your own risk. It's not recommended that you do that, but some people are very anxious and they do. So that's up to
It
you.
would be more than 30 days before we.
Okay. All right.
Good to know.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Jeff, so what, an encroachment like that, now
Mhm.
that it's brought to your attention, do you take action on that? Not that I want to make folks come back in
The
for
existing deck?
we do that in Londonderry. If something like, if we were to see this, they would then, an enforcement action would be taken and they would come in for a variance.
If I find it and I see it, we'll look into it.
Right.
I mean, but I'm not going to, I mean, if I have nothing, which I don't have any information, that's it.
No, as long as
Right.
we as a board has brought it to your
Yes.
attention, now it's out of,
Yes.
it's out of my hands,
Right.
it's in
Yeah.
your hands.
No, I
and,
will,
you know.
right. No, we'll take action based on,
Yeah, I mean, I just,
and it's already there, so it's
I would think
likely
it's
going
gonna
to be, right.
what's
Not
that?
I wouldn't think it's grandfather, but they could come back for a variance to get it legal. if they
Well,
want.
that's what they should do, in my opinion.
Right. And again, this is,
Before they
it-
sell the house, I would.
Right, they
If
won't get
they
title
promise.
insurance and they'll have issues with that. In theory.
If there's a finding against them, yeah. Not if it's not found.
Right. I mean, if somebody's good at doing survey and plot work and they see something encroaching into the setback, they should.
well, they
check.
will now because that is,
I would be interested to
this
look
all
at
has done by the surveyor.
I would be
So now we're gonna
interested to
have a
go back to
certified.
the tax map, well, the tax assessing cards, and see how long that deck has been there.
Yeah, I think I took a look.
The question is whether or not an application for variance was
Right.
Fine.
Is the
Or-
existing,
Right.
Yeah.
is it with the way it used to be? I mean, was there different setbacks back then or?
Right. I mean, you got to go through the whole thing.
You gotta
Was
do-
was it even was the ordinance even in place when
Exactly.
the deck went in? Right. And that's what I mean. I didn't find anything to the contrary.
right. So I'm thinking it
So-
was 1973. It was the zoning was in effect.
Right.
And the setback, that looks like that could be maybe 10 feet from the property line.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yep.
Maybe actually probably close to the property line. But
And
As long-
and to your point, we did look at 17 James Way with the deck on the side of
okay.
the house facing the
Yes.
street.
Yep.
That was something that was into the setback.
Okay.
So
No, but as long
so
as
we will. Right.
as long as you're made aware, so if
Oh,
people
yes.
are
Yep.
watching and listening, they know that we're taking appropriate action just
Yes.
to make whoever we need
Yeah.
to aware. That's all. And whatever you do, you do.
That was what, 11 Whitmore?
Yes.
Now I'm looking right now because I'm curious.
Yeah, I actually called it up right on the Google Maps, just say, okay, where is that and what's behind it?
And
Just
Just wanna-
down Pinecrest.
so it seems like we're down more members again now because Mark is gone, right? He left. And then
Kevin Comier.
and Kevin left, right?
Yep.
And Mark Benoit left. So we're down 3.
It seemed like just a minute ago we had
We did have a full board.
Well,
We
stopped.
did
Yes, but we're not now.
for 2 months.
So Kevin,
Weird, huh?
Mark, and Mark are gone. Jerry, you're a full member now.
Yeah, I was sworn at as a.
Congratulations,
Um,
Jerry.
Thank you.
So we
I
are
feel honored to be
1,
part of this
2,
team.
3, 4,
You ask good questions. It's important.
5.
Well, I want to reach out and kind of help them a little bit, and I'm like, that's not my job. But that one we had a couple when I first started. That I didn't like that builder guy. And I can't, you can't have a personal. Yeah, that was like the easiest.
mic.
That was the easiest, cheapest way to build it. So I'm like, really? You could have fixed that. Wouldn't even be here.
All right, so so I'm gonna reach out. Do we know when Troy's last day is?
August 7th,
August 5th.
5th or 7th, something like that.
Okay, so then he's still here to kind of help us fill some positions.
Yes.
So I'll reach out to him, just saying that we're now running lower than what we wanted.
Yes.
to be.
It's
Running lean.
So the
Where's
the
Troy
deck's
going?
in the assessing card. It's been there for a while.
I know. But
I'm not surprised. Like, I'm sure it wasn't there. I'm sure when they bought the house, it was.
It was there when they bought it.
No, I don't dispute that at all. It's just not the way it should be.
I thought he was. I can't. I don't know. I can't remember. But I know the guy that told me. Troy told him. So I can't. It wasn't close by. He was going trying something new. I thought.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to try something new myself.
All right.
Any other business?
Any other business?
Motion to adjourn?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned a little after 9 p.m. And thank you for all your help in
Absolutely.
getting this
Thank
all
you.
together for us. We appreciate that.